Progress.
Right, so Centre for Arts and Learning, delighted to have with us Theo Bryer, Maggie Pitfield and Jane to present Drama at the Heart of English, Transforming Practice in the Secondary Classroom. So Theo Bryer, Maggie Pitfield and Jane Coles present how drama and English can be united in highly productive ways in the secondary classroom for an inclusive, ethical and creative critical pedagogical approach to the reading of literary, dramatic and multimodal texts. So this year, the Centre for Arts and Learning has the theme of arts economies, and in a real sense, this bringing together of drama and English relates to that, because the arts are constantly called upon to justify their existences in education, as in society, and limiting learners to reductive views of what their enjoyable contributions to society could be is really true to the ethos of the pedagogies that are brought into this book and research that it relates to. So currently I'm reading Yanis Varoufakis, who imagines another now in which the values of capitalism are challenged, and character Costis questions why we need to reduce every value to a price, every exchange into a transaction, everything of incalculable beauty into a measurable object of desire. So Drama at the Heart of English, like this, explores ways of enabling learners to resituate value and resituate the value of their learning within society without that kind of calculation of every experience in a kind of financial or capitalized transaction. So bringing drama into the heart of English enables the thriving of learners, and this is really what the authors will be talking about. And it also redistributes the values of learning and creative contributions to society for increased dimensionality. So Dr. Theo Bryer leads the PGC in English with Drama and teaches on the MA English Education at UCL's Institute of Education. Before moving into higher education, she taught drama and other subjects in schools and colleges in Birmingham, London for over 20 years. So research and publications focus on the cross between live and recorded drama and the ways that role play can support learning. Maggie Pitfield I've known for much longer, because Maggie is a member of TAL. Maggie is a member of the Centre for Arts and Learning and has been a wonderful support to all of us in the Centre for Arts and Learning for many years, and was head of department in education here. So Maggie's career spans 24 years in London comprehensive schools and 18 years in higher education. And she's currently a visiting research fellow at Goldsmiths, and we hope that continues. So Drama at the Heart of English is Maggie's most recent publication, draws on her research and the contribution that educational drama practice makes to the reading of literary texts in the secondary education classroom. Dr. Jane Coles. Until recently, Jane led the MA English Education at UCL's Institute of Education and contributed to the PGC secondary English programme. Before moving into higher education, Jane taught English in London comprehensive schools for 15 years, during which time she was seconded to the National Shakespeare in Schools project and edited 3 titles for the Cambridge Schools Shakespeare series. Current areas of research and publication focus on creative literacy and the teaching of Shakespeare. So I will now hand over to our esteemed authors.
Thanks very much, Miranda. It falls to me to kick things off. And I'm first of all going to try and outline some of the reasons why we felt the need to write this book. And I'm going to start off by saying that the word heart in Drama at the Heart of English is as much a key word in the title as drama is, and suggests something about the current state of English, or the way that we see it. All 3 of us, as Miranda's already indicated, are experienced PGCE tutors, and our perception gained through that work over the past decade or two, our perception of English is of an increasingly dry, instrumental, even rather joyless or indeed heartless experience. It's a government-approved version of English where young people's own experiences and voices seem to have very little relevance in the relentless pursuit of memorising an abstracted form of canon-heavy so-called knowledge. It's surely no coincidence that over this same period of time, numbers of students choosing A-level English have dramatically declined, with a knock-on effect in the university sector exacerbated by policymakers' marginalisation of arts and humanities more generally, something I hardly need mention here in Goldsmiths, I think. As part of our project is to reclaim English as an arts subject, restoring it as a creative and deeply humane area of the curriculum. Throughout our own teaching careers, drama's always been an integral part of our work. Maggie, an experienced English and drama teacher, equally at home in either department, which is more unusual than you'd probably be led to believe. Theo, a drama specialist who's always been interested in exploring drama's cross-curricular potential, and now, as you know, leads the English with Drama PGC at the IOE. And my background as an English teacher, who always interested in ways of integrating drama methods in the classroom. And as has already been pointed out, part of the Rex Gibson Shakespeare in Schools project also helped me develop those interests. And these experiences have absolutely been the driving force in terms of our own experience and our own research that inform the book. Of real concern to all three of us is the way that interactive drama-inflected practice is effectively being squeezed out of the current exam-driven regime, a point we make strongly in the introduction to the book. When curriculum time is tight, there's a tendency for drama in English to be reduced to special events. For example, visiting theatre companies, running workshops around set texts. And constant professional scrutiny means teachers are less likely to indulge in what seems like risky practice in the classroom. You'll notice that in our book, we talk about drama in English as a hyphenated concept, and that's the next slide, please, Miranda. Thanks. Over the years, we've become convinced that simply lifting a chunk of ideas and activities from drama as a specialist subject and just dropping them into English just doesn't work in the long run. CPD run by theatre practitioners or drama specialists might spark huge enthusiasm amongst English teacher participants at the time, but it tends not to last. And it perpetuates the notion that this is something that is that not only requires specialised skills and training, but also a large special space to do it in. In chapter 2 of the book, we examine the English drama relationship through a historical lens to interrogate in some detail why significant developments in drama-inflected English pedagogy have rarely left a lasting broad-based classroom legacy. So what do we mean by drama in English, and why do we value what it contributes? And that's the next slide. Oh, we're already on that slide. That's fine. Thank you. Far from this form of drama being risky or presenting something special, we stress its everyday qualities. Raymond Williams, the renowned cultural commentator, finds value in the very ordinariness of culture being made and remade in our daily lives. Drama and role play, he argues, are part of the daily rhythms of everyday life. Throughout our research, we continue to be impressed by learners' readiness to just slip in and out of role. We argue that drama in English should be embedded across all aspects of the subject, especially reading and writing, and not just confined to a small corner of speaking and listening, which is where policymakers insist drama should be located. The examples of classroom practice we include in the book suggest that working in this way not only encourages students to think creatively, but crucially, to develop a critical perspective. And we contend that this applies equally to A-level study as it does to Key Stage 3. When approaching literary texts, this means students immersing themselves in the world of the text, seeing situations, events, characters from different perspectives, and collectively negotiating new understandings. It's an inherently inclusive pedagogy that draws on students' own lives and sets of cultural knowledge. We argue that it motivates learners by engendering playfulness and enjoyment. And above all, this pedagogy is one which affords learners proper agency and is rightly respectful of English teachers' intellectual, creative, and professional expertise. And I'm going to hand over to Theo at this point to give some practical examples.
Okay, so what does the kind of drama that we're proposing look like in English classroom? To answer that, I'll take you to a seminar room, the second week of my English with Drama PGCE course with my new student teachers for something quite immediate and straightforward. So I talked to my student teachers about the difference between learning through drama and learning about drama, because they're learning to become both English and drama teachers and English teachers who use drama in their classrooms. So there's quite a lot for them to get a handle on. And we thought about this, we thought about Great Expectations, having looked at some screen versions in the lecture in the morning. And Hubertha came to the front, and following the directions of the rest of the group, she assumed the role of Miss Havisham, as she might appear to Pip when he encounters her for the first time in chapter 8 in the novel. So the activity sent the students darting back to the text to check what was salient in Miss Havisham's appearance, or criterial, as Gunter Kress might put it. Her head leaning on her hand, or the white cardigan that somebody placed dependent on her hair, that as Hubertha adjusted herself to accommodate it, seemed appropriately transformative. So a simple activity that involved only one student coming up out of their from their desk, but that took this group somewhere and might take a whole class places. So then we discussed what happened next. Perhaps somebody might bring Miss Havisham to life from her portrait, because this was a portrait. He said, this is not just, we're not just making her, we're thinking of her as in the form of a portrait. He said, what might happen next? Would we take her hand and bring her to life? And then we thought, what role might we, the students, assume? I'm thinking about you, you're the students. What role might you assume, if you imagine a birthday, what role might the students assume in speaking to her? So if we'd read later in the novel, perhaps they'd assume the role of Estella or Pip, who may have some pressing questions to pose to her, seeking some answers from part through time. Or perhaps it might be a housekeeper or a servant who dusts the portrait and who wonders what it represents and why. Or perhaps it might be a poet, historian, or journalist. So creating a portrait or presenting the class with someone in role as a portrait is one of the renowned drama educator Dorothy Hethcott's role conventions. There are around 34 of them. She calls them role conventions, and she developed them in the 80s and added to them since. These around 34 conventions are encouraged to intend a class to focus on the interpretation of meaning and to attend to the nuances of text, either in this form or as it might be embodied or implied in significant ways by people, objects, or other things. The conventions provided the inspiration for a small research project that I did with my student teachers in 2022 that informed the chapter on reading and role in the book. We found out quite a lot about how versatile they could be. So Hethcott is very keen, Dorothy Hethcott is very keen that the teacher should see implications in any props or objects that a teacher might present the class with, perhaps in the form of sort of a character bag like this, that may have intriguing things in it. And what does it imply? Anticipating, so they might, simple thing. We do this with our student teachers often. They're always experimenting in different ways with their classes. So it anticipates the possibilities for immersion in a narrative through the questions that they pose students, particularly if the students have something like this to fill out, which is suggestive of a role for them. So this is this implies a frame or a perspective that determines how they will then make sense of the objects and why they might be significant. I mean, bags are lost all the time, but perhaps this bag is important for some reason. One of the outcomes of the research project that I did with my student teachers was that we recognised how significant it was that the class should assume a role in these kinds of dramatic encounters, however simple they are, but that really affected the shift into the imaginative realm. And they found that it really stimulated discussion or debate as the class embarked on interpreting whatever they were presented with, encouraging them to assume a point of view or an opinion, which then would translate then into their further reading of the novel or whatever text these activities were associated with. So the move into role is intended to encourage a class to question, examine, and develop a quite specific relationship with the narrative. Thus, prying open the text, as Cecily O'Neill and Teresa Rogers put it, like this, has a critical dimension, and this is what Jane was talking about. Heskett was alert to the syntax of signal and response. She called it the syntax of signal and response, or the power of the sign involved in the negotiation of roles that people inhabit in social as well as dramatic contexts. And this echoes a sociological perspective that she was very interested in the work of Goffman, and she really drew on his work to understand more about how being in role enables you to have a particular focus, a particular perspective. We recognise that a significant affordance of role is its flexibility, ranging from the briefest engagements and the kinds of embodiment in like making a portrait to obviously performing on a stage in front of an audience. We're interested in the former in English classrooms. So in our book, we offer plenty of examples of this kind of drama in English that can happen without much fanfare, and that implies a kind of web of meaning around the text. That's what Cecily O'Neill talks about, a web of meaning or a hinterland, a suggested past, present or future of the characters. So what might the characters have to say to each other if they meet up 10 years after the end of a play, novel, for example? How is the text enlarged by thinking about events from the perspective or point of view from a minor or silent character, or maybe a servant or someone who witnessed or overheard something or has something to recount or report to someone else about what they've seen and understood. So working with texts that do not reflect aspects of the reader's identities and experiences. I mean, obviously for a lot of students in London classrooms, this text does not reflect aspects of the students' experiences or identities, but taking on a role can become an inclusive endeavour. And we think this is particularly the case if those involved are offered a range of media, including video, to adapt or interpret what they're presented with. So our vision for drama in English is one that takes account of the rapidly expanding systems of communication in the digital era, including changes in the ways that texts are produced and read, and that they proliferate across different platforms and appear in different versions. You think Harry Potter or Northern Lights, whatever, and the different iterations that it appears in as play text, as a film, as game, whatever. Obviously these are absolutely key to the students' experience. So in our book, as well as exploring how the ways in which assuming a role encourages learners to draw on the resources of their bodies and cultural repertoires to bring their understanding to a text, we also consider the possibilities for learning through media production. So a distinguishing feature of Gunter Kress's social semiotic theory of multimodality is his focus on what he calls, or what is known as, a motivated sign, highlighting how individuals who are agentive and generative engage in sign making rather than sign use. So implying that, you know, every time that we make signs as we are communicating, as I'm gesturing to you, I'm not just using making things anew. So this means that we attribute a degree of authorial intent to the ways that learners negotiate their ideas and make informed choices in the creation of the dramatic media text that we write about in chapter 7. So I'm going to show you some pictures now, because you need a break. Obviously, it's all about enjoyment, doing drawing. Okay. So here are some still photos drawn from some of the filmmaking projects that we've done with young people. So this was our project Beowulf that we did, and that this is Grendel's mother in South London secondary school. I love this picture.
Commonly known as the Mere.
The Mere. She's at the bottom of the lake waiting for Beowulf to come and get her. And he's got to swim for a whole day to come down. So luckily they had quite a, they could, you know, do this low angle shot like that. And high angle shot, sorry, it's from a high angle looking down. And yeah, and she loved it. She just loved being this really powerful, ferocious monster who is probably the inspiration for the monster in Aliens. So she's properly scary, Grendel's mother. And she's waiting to eat Beowulf alive. So when I interviewed them afterwards, they said, oh, yes, she really looked like she was going to eat, you know, she really wanted to have a bite out of him. So, you know, despite being a man with the strength of 30 in his hands, she is a match for him. And that was, yeah, that was so, you know, this was part of our kind of what we wanted to do, was to explore that Beowulf from the perspective of this character who's been rather sidelined. There's two monsters and a dragon in Beowulf, but mostly people think of it like Tolkien wasn't interested in Grendel's mother. She doesn't even have a name. So anyway, so yeah, go to the next one. The next, yeah. So this is the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. This is the nightmare life in death. They dice with death. The nightmare life and death has won. Yeah, so that, yeah, Coleridge is the Ancient Mariner. This, and we did it with the London, well, I shouldn't really say, because I shouldn't say the school, but anyway, it was a school that had something to do with mariners. So it was quite sweet because they had mariner jumpers and we were down by a river, and that was great. I like that it was black and white because it was a little bit Seventh Seal-ish somehow, even though they hadn't seen the Seventh Seal. But there was also all these zombies, so it was almost like, which is kind of like the Ancient Mariner has zombies in it. You sail the ship, and they got into the zombie thing. So it was like they were drawing their insights into these kinds of texts to make sense of the Ancient Mariner, which seemed a perfectly legitimate way of developing their own readings, really. So the next one is, if you can move, yes, this is, oh, that's oh yeah, this is the shift from the dreary and everyday to the fantastical that happens at the start of Haroun in the Sea of Stories. So yes, Rushdie, Salman Rushdie, yeah. So they managed to get blag their way into the aquarium, and then a little juxtaposition, some nice editing of monsters coming out of the Thames. Yeah. Next one, please. Oh yeah, this is what I was expecting to come out. This is Poe's, Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. And this is the point at which, yeah, particularly the moment when the protagonist is haunted by a constant tapping and opens wide the door to reveal darkness there and nothing more. It was quite scary. And there's some of their editing on the iPads. And the next one, any guesses? In the Gothic theme. So yeah, it could be Dracula actually. We should do Dracula. That'll be the next one. This is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And this was chapter 7, the incident at the window and the transformation that happens involuntarily to the horror of Jekyll and his friend Mr. Utterson and Mr. Enfield, who are watching. So I'll read to you. The smile was struck out of his face and succeeded by an expression of such abject terror and despair as froze the very blood of the two gentlemen. Easy. Okay. So obviously most of these images are from canonical texts that form the staple diet of the English curriculum in England. But we make the argument that viewing themselves on the screen has the potential to highlight questions of representation, is sometimes even in more salient ways than live dramatic action, because offering opportunities for students to insert themselves into the text in such visible ways, so that they can manipulate what they look like as well, and so that they can author their own dramatic readings and share authority with the authors of the texts that they are studying.
And we're on to the next slide.
Yes, back to you.
So yeah, so that's the fun interlude, and we're back to the theory again.
That's some theory in a playful way.
In a playful way, indeed. This is less playful. Right, so we regard classrooms as socio-cultural spaces where meanings are made rather than merely transmitted. And try telling that to Nick Gibb. Within that overarching Vygotskian framework, there are 3 key theorists whose work we've synthesised and developed for our specific purposes. So firstly, renowned drama educationalist who you've heard Theo mention already, Dorothy Heathcote. Reader response theorist, Louise Rosenblatt, will be very well known to anyone who's studied English literature. Literacy and learning specialist, Myra Bars. Although coming from different disciplines and perspectives, coincidentally, all 3 of those writers give separate accounts of living through, what we call living through, and enactment as powerful concepts, underlining the natural affinity, we believe, between reading, learning, and drama. For Heathcote, it's vital that learners work from inside a situation, with all the in-the-moment thinking that entails, very often brought about through collaborative role play, for instance. But crucially, in her practice, she would regularly halt the action for learners to step outside of their roles to reflect on the situation. For us, this simultaneous inside-outside perspective is central facet of drama in English, involving interplay between the creative, the affective, and the critical. Similarly, Rosenblatt's notions of aesthetic and efferent forms of reading, where the former represents the experience of immersion in the world of a literary text, living through it, and the latter a more distanced analytical appraisal. Significant for our purposes is that Rosenblatt envisages the interplay between text and reader as a reenactment of the text. She describes the way in which the reader, quote, infuses their own voice, their own body, their own gestures, in short, their own interpretation into the words of the text. So that's part of the normal, natural reading process that goes on in your head. And obviously clear parallels there with ideas around role-play and drama. Bars highlights how role-play and writing in role make use of resources that learners, she says, naturally possess. She argues that enactment and role-taking are a fundamental mode of learning in English, simultaneously involving social action and symbolisation. Thus, for Bars, the act of reading should be considered as drama in the head, creative writing as drama on paper, and physicalised role play as a crucial part of the whole class reading experience, one that recognises the body as a key interpretive resource. And I'm cueing in Maggie.
Oh, right. Sorry, I get the graveyard slot on this, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm going to take an example from the book. I think it's chapter 5, drama and writing. Just to give you a sort of insight into how we approach different areas of the curriculum in the book. And given the importance that writing has in the curriculum, we were aware that that was going to be a key area of interest for English teachers, particularly how drama in English supports and enriches young people's writing practices. So we try, and I hope we succeed, in offering a persuasive rationale for employing the drama in English approach when teaching writing. If we could go on to the next slide. So on this slide, it summarises the synergies between educational drama activity, role making and role taking, and forms of enactment, which you've heard all about already, the synergy between those and the writing process. I'll just give you a moment to read that. Now, when we recently gave a presentation to members of the Subject Association London Drama at Amanda's invitation, many of the attendees, we found out, teach both drama as a discrete subject and English, because more and more drama teachers are being co-opted in to teach English and vice versa. So we prompted the attendees at the meeting to think about the types of writing that they routinely set for their students, and also to consider which types of writing predominate and why that might be. So it was no surprise that they most often cited the evaluative analytical style of writing, or style of written response, and that's exam driven. So in English, in the subject English, students have to write in what we might call an old-fashioned lit-crit style, in response to their reading of literary texts. And of course, we've gone now in English to 100% terminal examination. So that is now baked into the assessment system. In drama, as a discrete subject, they're required to write about their drama activity in an evaluative way, to explain what they did and why they did it. And there's far less emphasis now on the practical. So in Drama at the Heart of English, we argue that practical drama activity provides students, and this is from Key Stage 3 to A level, with opportunities to express themselves creatively and with critical insight, and that the creative is not separate from, or indeed inferior to, the critical. And so I've got a few examples here that we use and we've seen teachers use of this creative critical approach. And my apologies to the English PGCE students who Jez invited me to come and do a session with, because you will have heard of some of this already. So I'm taking as the example Stone Cold, the novel by Robert Swindells. And it's, for many years, it's been a popular novel taught at Key Stage 3, although not uncontroversial. One of the main characters is a reporter who goes undercover as a homeless young person on the streets of London. And the lesson sequence we describe involved, a few years ago, some student teachers on an English PGCE working out how to approach this novel with a Key Stage 3 class through in-role activity. So one of the activities, some of the students adopted the reporter role to interview others in role as characters from the novel. This required all of them to look back at the detail of the novel, the reporters to think about what type of story the undercover reporter would choose to write, having experienced life on the streets themselves, and those playing the others to review what their characters knew and felt about the plight of the homeless and about the strange disappearances of young homeless people in London. That's an important feature of the narrative novel. So why work in this way? Well, working in this way means that learners are engaging with the world of the text, both imaginatively and with a critical lens. So that first point on the slide. But as well as that, they're establishing their own position in relation to it. When the reporters subsequently had in-role conversations with their editors about the type of story that would appeal to the newspaper's readers, this brought up interesting questions of stance and bias, which, if you are looking at print media, you need to address. And that led to the writing of the actual newspaper reports. And that's an example of writing in role. And what we like about this example, and we say more about this in the book, is the way it shows how the imagined but authentic context of the drama can fire students' imagination and motivate them to write and to develop what we call in the book a writerly disposition. Taking this approach means that the choice of novel is also very important. The authors of a recent National Association for the Teaching of English, NATE, position paper on creativity say that the material, quote, must matter to the communicator and matter enough to be presented to others. Stone Cold offers imaginative space, which the teacher can positively exploit, and we've observed how English teachers use their artistry and expertise to work with their students from within that imaginative space. Another instance from, looking at the time, are we still okay for time, Miranda? Yeah. Another instance from the Stone Cold example demonstrates how drama activity allows students to write from within, actually from within the thick of the action. They're enticed into role by the teacher's narration, which employs an urgent tone to set the scene of an improvised farewell at the railway station between Link, who's the main character, who's very unhappy, he's moving to London, to a life on the streets. It's a conversation he's having at the railway station with Carol, his sister. Once the conversations are underway, the tutor ratchets up the urgency by unexpectedly making the station announcement that the train to London will leave in 2 minutes from platform 1, so that the farewell has to be truncated and things that brother and sister might want to say to each other are left unsaid. Further narration from the teacher sends the Link characters to board the train and the Carol characters to return home, and prompts them to write from within the heat of the moment, either Link's letter to his sister expressing what he hasn't had time to say, or Carol's daily diary entry. This lends an immediacy to the students' writing and ensures that the drama carries on inside their heads as they write. An approach that Teresa Kremin and her colleagues aptly refer to as seizing the moment to write. The teacher as narrator voice is part of the English teacher repertoire, as is using voice in artful and engaging ways to create atmosphere, tension, or to bring a particular character to life when reading a fictional text aloud to students. Now, I haven't touched on our examples of the teacher adopting a role within the drama, what's called teacher in role, sometimes for the very briefest but telling of moments. But suffice to say that the teacher's in-role interventions are carefully designed to introduce a new perspective and or to model language appropriate to the situation. This can be really profound in terms of how the students then go on to experiment with language in the writing that they produce. Right, I'm going to return to the question of drama and the types of writing that examinations require. Although Jane, Theo and I are clear in our book that English is about much more than examination preparation, we do address the question of whether drama activity has anything to offer in preparing students for the rigidity of the writing required by terminal exams. To illustrate our findings, if we go on to the next slide, here are some thoughts from two of the young people we observed in drama and English lessons, actually when they were in Key Stage 3, and then subsequently interviewed in a focus group setting during the revision period for their GCSE exams. Now, as you can see, Ricky and Zaymar, anonymised of course, are in no doubt that their experiences of drama in English have helped hone their writing skills for examination purposes. We would also suggest that their responses here, and there are longer quotes in the book, are a testament to the creativity of their teachers, whose understanding of the drama in English writing process has clearly been significant. Now, I just want to talk about a little bit about the process of us writing this book collaboratively, because crucially, both Ricky and Zaymar highlight the importance of collaboration. So I'm going to dwell for a moment on our own collaborative process in writing this book, which makes it a rather different book to any we might have written individually. Just as our own classroom practices and those of the teachers we've observed are underpinned by Vygotskian principles, so too was our writing collaboration. The three of us are friends and colleagues. Jane and I worked together both in schools and at Goldsmiths, and Theo and Jane worked at UCL Institute of Education. Theo and I have devised and run practical workshops at various teachers' conferences, and in different permutations, we've all researched and written articles and chapters together. But writing something book length in a wholly collaborative way was still quite an enterprise. As Jane has indicated, and Miranda, from our brief biographies, we each bring something different to the table. And I'm sure you can imagine some of the conversations that took place as we critiqued and argued robustly about each other's contributions. I'm not going to cry, but some of my text was taken out of analysis, and I don't want you to think I'm bitter about it.
She was looking at me.
Both of you. Throughout, though, we've been inspired by each other's ideas and by the way we each shed a different light on the material at hand, And it's this actually which has made the entire experience much more pleasurable than writing alone. The differences in perspective have contributed to an invigorating process, and out of our tussles, and there were quite a few, has emerged a book of which all three of us are really proud. Of most importance is the way in which this collaborative process has significantly progressed, expanded, and enhanced our thinking about drama in English. Now, what's the template for this way of working? Well, we had a discussion about that, and we decided it's come from all the other collaborations, past and present, that we've each been involved in. And central to these, going back well over 20 years, and some, central to all those collaborations with colleagues in other settings, there was always a desire to provide for our students a stimulating, relevant and challenging curriculum, one that takes due account of their experiences and knowledge, and which both they and we find pleasure in, because shouldn't pleasure absolutely be at the heart of English? And as we propose in the book, in this model of English, our students are also a key part of the collaborative process. So finally, let's not forget the vital collaboration that happens through different kinds of activism. That's an issue we take up in the book as well. But it's all very well writing books that hopefully lots of people read, but we don't know. That's one aspect. So different kinds of activism, certainly as part of unions and subject associations, and through the dissemination of our research. And probably, before I go on to say about the sort of activism I'm talking about, this is where our work is most in line with the Arts Economist Statement, which is the Centre for Arts and Learning's theme for this year. So our curriculum activism has taken different forms. Theo, for example, has been very involved in the ongoing fight to carve out curriculum space for drama as a subject in its own right, when it's the only one of the creative arts subjects that does not receive recognition in the statutory national curriculum. Yes, drama's in the national curriculum for English, but in the latest version, it gets about half a sentence. It doesn't have a curriculum document of its own, which sometimes in the past has been a godsend. But it does, of course, mean that position of having no official recognition in that way. That does mean that drama finds itself periodically endangered, most notably in recent times during Michael Gove's reform of the curriculum, because he wanted to take GCSE drama out of GCSEs completely, make drama sort of an enrichment activity in schools. And he wanted to drop any mention of educational drama, obviously not plays, but educational drama, in the English national curriculum. Okay, that battle was fought and won, but that happens again and again. It keeps coming up. As the CAL, the Centre for Arts and Learning, Arts Economist Statement makes clear, it's vital to oppose the marginalisation of, and I quote, the learning experiences that enable participation in and contribution to purposeful, engaged, necessary experiences of the arts, particularly as arts practice also illuminates and exhibits the cause and effect of social inequality. So by shining a light on these inequalities through our practice, that provides the means to challenge them. If you close that down, where's the challenge come from? Jane and I cut our campaigning teeth many years ago during the anti-SATS campaign. And that was the then government's determination to introduce highly reductive tests for 14-year-olds. Our opposition to this imposition took place in our school because we were teaching together at the time as officers of the local branch of the NUT, forerunner of the National Education Union, well, part of it, part forerunner, and as officers, and the London Association for the Teaching of English, late meetings. The anti-SATS fight was a rallying cry against the implementation of a totally unsuitable assessment model, one that threatened the English curriculum and our students' experience of it. And if you think that sounds all too familiar in the current educational climate, you'd be right. Round it comes again in a different form. So our book challenges current orthodoxies about English teaching, and we argue strongly that both grassroots and political change is necessary and possible. We have on our side the undeniable fact that English, a once popular subject, is experiencing a very unfortunate sea change due to government policy and the straitjacket of Ofsted inspections. And other Anglophone jurisdictions have also experienced a similar narrowing of the English or language arts curriculum, as we highlight in our book, although closer to home in Wales, a very different and much more collaborative process of curriculum renewal has recently taken place. So it is possible. In England, the number of young people opting to study English at A-level is falling through the floor. Applications for teacher training are down nationally, and many university English departments are struggling to recruit to undergraduate English programs. At just such a moment, and I'm going to borrow unashamedly from the words of two of our reviewers of the book, both of them English teachers at heart, one now an assistant head teacher and the other a professor of education. Drama at the heart of English is a timely call to action and a must read for all involved in English teaching. And we would add, for all those involved in arts education. So I'm going to hand back over to Jane very quickly to sum up.
Yes, the end is in sight, do not fear. So the final above the slide 12. So the influential Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky, whom many of you will have heard of, believed that arts, literature and drama are vital, potentially transformative elements in any education system. And we want to end with his words. And I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to read through that. I would like to see those words engraved at the beginning of any revised national curriculum document that comes out of hopefully the next government. So basically Vygotsky is saying developing learners' imaginative capabilities is of the very highest social and cultural importance and indeed drives all progress in society. And our argument, finally, is that English represents a crucial curricular space, not the only one, obviously, but a crucial part of that curricular space within which opportunities to develop learners' imagination can be fostered. Drama in English enriches these possibilities. And we'll end there. Thank you. Yeah. Just to say, we've ended that there is a discount code there that Routledge have given us and that's current and up to the 31st of December, although I think they are saying that you really need to use it before the 22nd of December, I think, to be able to get it processed through. Or if, you know, we're not turning into salespeople at this point, but we do have some copies of the book that we've got with a whacking of 40% off the discount, because the book was just published this autumn. So we've got copies of the book at 40% discount available now. So it's £16.50. So do have a word with one of us if you'd like to get a copy of the book.
Card machine.
And I do have a card reader that I borrowed, which I think I can use. Anyway, we will definitely end there.
It's quite all right because our session goes till 7 o'clock, so we have lots of space for questions. I'm going to stop our screen share now. Just to check, people online, can you see the room? Anybody online want to tell us?
Yes, we can.
You can see the room. Fantastic. That's from Phil. Brilliant. Okay, so we're open to questions now. And people online, if you'd like to put your questions in the chat, I will ask them as they come up, and open to questions in the room here. Amanda?
I'd like to know a little bit about how this actually started. What made the three of you get together and find a starting point? Because as you say, you come from quite same but different sort of areas. Did you draw the three circles and go for the overlap in the middle and start there, or yes? How? What was,
You think we're a living Venn diagram?
Yes.
In a way, we are.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when I saw it. And I thought, did you all sort of put your finger on the first starting point, or did you have to sort of wrestle with that and find where you would start? I'm interested in the sort of inception of the book.
Well, Jane and I wrote a book before this, which was about reading Shakespeare through drama, because we were concerned about the way that, well, one of the things we were concerned about, the way that somehow Shakespeare is always this special case and needs all these theatrical approaches. And we would argue that that's all well and good, but again, it doesn't translate into the classroom practice that the English teacher can do and readily bring to hand. And we had quite a lot of observation material and interview material from both of research that we've done with English.
Our separate research projects overlapped,
yes,
in an interesting way, although different. There were areas that they overlapped.
Yes.
We sort of saw the possibility there. Plus the fact we were both very concerned, sort of building on your point about the kind of the way drama in English is conceived, particularly thinking, the area that drama comes into English is Shakespeare.
always Shakespeare.
And the active Shakespeare movement that I was involved in back in the late 80s, that has now morphed very much into, or the market has been sort of cornered by theatre companies like the Royal Shakespeare Company, the Globe, that do some fantastic stuff, no doubt about it. But one of our concerns is that there is a tendency, therefore, to kind of de-skill, deprofessionalise English teachers. That, you know, it's almost though you need the experts to come in and show you how it's done.
And the drama teacher, of course, same.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we one of the things is that we saw recurring patterns. Sorry, I'm removing that card because I'm getting too hot at the same time. One of the recurring patterns we could see, not just here in the UK, but also in quite a bit of the reading we've done with the drama and English specialist practitioners in Australia, sort of constantly asking the questions, why do we constantly need to keep reinventing, you know, active Shakespeare? Because sort of every decade there's a renewed launch of some sort of active Shakespeare, which begs the question, what happened, you know, sort of the decade previously? Why hasn't that been sustained, that impetus? And we think it's because it's sort of, generally speaking, those sort of bigger events pushing the desks back tend to be, you know, particularly in an overcrowded curriculum, most English teachers don't feel or find it hard to find the space to do that kind of thing. But what we wanted to do was to try to develop, from our observation of English teachers working in classrooms, where something seems to be sustainable and developed long term and embedded long term. What was it that was, what's the difference there? And we thought that what we could see was something that is smaller in scale and, as I say, used much more embedded in practice than something that just sort of gets shipped in for the teaching of Shakespeare or parachuted in terms of the special events with theatre companies coming in.
And another thing that we were thinking about, that drew us, that sort of fed into this book, which is parallel, thinking about drama in English, which is parallel to the sort of developments in Shakespeare, but active Shakespeare, was the project that we did around Beowulf, where we started, which was thinking about looking at Beowulf through different media, and which I read about for my PhD, but you were very involved in. So we wrote quite a lot together through that process, and a lot of the theoretical stuff, Myra Barr's writing about enactments, about drama on paper, and we started to discover, and I think that's reflected as well in the history chapter that Maggie wrote a lot, that a lot of this theoretical stuff, as you say, had been developed in the past, and the kind of Hesketh, the way that Hesketh is written, and it's all been lost, as things tend to be, and that there was some drawing together that we did through the process of that Beowulf project that helped us, as we were working and teaching and working with our students, to have new insights that we wanted to explore further, really. And I just think that process is engaging and interesting. We were interested. We wanted to think further about it. We had a great time in the library at the IOE, going through all of the what was it called, the journal?
The New Era
Journal. We discovered Marjorie Hoard writing in 1940, I think, about writing in role. Fantastic article about writing in role with some lovely examples from her students.
Disappeared, you know, no longer visible.
And Marjorie Hoard, who I remember Gavin Bolton writing about, and I remember thinking, she sounds interesting. Why is she never, you know, why isn't she remembered? And Ken Byron and other people who, you know, we're quite old, we've encountered or we read, you know, maybe when we were doing our PGCE, they've opened their eyes to things and then have been lost along the way. So it was partly the stage we're at in our career. It was a bit of a journey through that.
But we also wanted, I would add, we also wanted to say there is a chapter on Shakespeare in this, but we wanted to say, you know, drama in English, which is the term we coined for it, is not just about Shakespeare. No. It's not just about plays. It goes throughout the English curriculum, and that was the point, and that was the impetus for this book, really. Having all those things, the Shakespeare, the reading Shakespeare through drama, Beowulf project, all of those, we suddenly thought, well, why isn't there that proof that says, no, drama is at the heart of everything we're doing. So that's how it came about.
Thanks.
Questions, Julia?
So have you written a chapter each, or are they all written in community?
We took responsibility for different chapters, although sometimes they were written collaboratively. or written by one and then changed by another. But then once they were all in place, then there was a lot of toing and throwing between the three of us, I would say. I think we would have found it impossible to write every chapter completely collaboratively. Someone had to take responsibility for each chapter. But then when that was done, as I said, there was one chapter that actually the drama and writing chapter, which you had a lot of input into, and then I took it over. So there were,
because we both had, partly we've just recently finished our PhDs. We both had chunks of stuff about drama and writing. It was really, we really tuttled it out, didn't we? And learned a lot.
Actually, it's not that recent now. Time really goes, doesn't it?
Mine's quite recent, I feel.
No. Time's gone on. But yeah, so that was the process, and that final bit of everybody reading each chapter and then interminable meetings about each chapter was very interesting. Sometimes very painful, and sometimes rather friendly, actually.
It's good. It's very good to become a better writer and to,
I would say that, definitely.
I mean, to pay for, but also to think about what students, teaching, writing, all of these things, in a way, the whole process is part of what we do and what we teach. So it's important.
Taylor.
I am not an English specialist, so I was listening to you very much as a parent of two boys who had their love of reading completely killed by secondary English, and I just kind of want to know, how optimistic are you about any prospect for change, or where are those cracks or those possibilities for things improving?
Well, I actually think it's got to change.
It's unsustainable at the moment, isn't it? The number of exclusions is rising at a ridiculous rate. The number of kids who need education, health, and support plans, care plans, is rising massively. So local authorities can't keep up with the demand. That's a failure of the mainstream system, isn't it? So it's becoming exclusionary rather than one of inclusion. So yeah, I think it's unsustainable. Poor kids going through the process at the moment. I mean, I'm a heart an English teacher. My partner was an English teacher right up to when he retired. Our daughter started A-level English and dropped it. And she just, she was just not inspired by it at all. And
yet she's an avid reader.
She's an avid reader. She's a very, very good writer. But in English, well, really, she went into economic and political geography, which sort of did what English was not doing for her in terms of, political ideas and bring your own, properly your own reading and interpretation into things, and having a more internationalist perspective than the very narrow canonical one. So yes, it's, I think it does have to change, but we need to, I would say moments of optimism, the creative resilience of English teachers that we have seen in classrooms, in terms of the English teachers we talk about in our research, who are working in, in territory, in an environment that is not encouraging working in creative, interactive ways, who were managing to carve out spaces for that kind of work. So seeing teachers working in that way and pushing back against the system is enormously inspirational, and hats off to them. And you know, so that's a real cause for inspiration. But we're going to have to fight. I think, you know, all of us who are interested in whether you're, you know, English as a curriculum area or other arts curriculum areas, we have to, I think, fight. And I think one of the fight very hard through whatever our different organisations are that we may be involved in. And I think a moment is going to come, I suspect, after the next election, but it's not going to be handed to us on a plate. I see no indication of that at all. But there is a moment, I think, where there will be some talk of revising the curriculum, and I think that's where we, teaching unions, professional organisations, research groupings, that's where I think we need to fight damn hard and to effect change, because
This book actually is published by Rutledge, but it's in a series for the National Association of Teaching English. So, you know, it's finding those spaces to input into, really. I mean, Jane, I'm very hopeful. We've applied for a bursary to a conference in Australia because, you know, there's a lot of really good work being done in the Australian context in this particular area. So you have to look to other areas and see what's going on, you know, and make links, maybe, if they give us the money to go.
I think with campaigning to get rid of GCSEs, which will maybe a lot, but we don't need to have two sets of public exams. But it's pretty unique, this country, in that they don't have GCSEs, and now that students stay on in school till they're 18, so that seems to me. And we did around after COVID, when there really seemed to be an opportunity then to challenge this, you know, assessment-driven regime. So hopefully there will be more opportunities in the future. But I have to say, last week I started doing my school visits, because that's what Amanda and I are doing at the moment, around schools, watching students teach, which I'm desperate for. I keep saying to my students, are you PGCE students? Yes. Yes. So I keep saying to my students, can I come and see you next? They're like, no, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready. I'm desperate to get back into classrooms. First lesson I saw was about Arthurian legends. And within, you know, 20 minutes, you had pushed back the desk and they were all fighting, doing a slow motion battle, these year sevens. Fantastic. And they all wrote about it. And the teacher let her do it. I mean, there are opportunities, but it takes it takes courage, perseverance, and also, you know, obviously a supportive department. Also, she's a student teacher. She's not necessarily going to feel those pressures that inevitably next year will come. But I would urge you to look for those opportunities, try them out, because then the teacher realised that if the battle was done in slow motion, it was safe, it was okay, and it can actually be quite, you know, could feed into their writing in a very engaging way. And obviously the boys loved it, you know, so did the girls, in fact. But yeah, so I do think there is hope.
I think we are coming up to a general election.
Yeah.
And now is the time to apply that sort of macro political pressure, isn't it? Because if Labour do get in, as it looks like they are going to, they've got to have an education policy, and there's got to be input into it. I say they've got to have one, because we're not very clear what that is. One of the
few pledges they've made is to review the curriculum, to set up some sort of review body, and I think so. That's what I mean about there is a moment there that I think we have to just insert ourselves into whatever cracks appear and force those cracks open. And I have to say, in terms of not only in terms of the school curriculum, but also the initial teacher education landscape as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I retired from UCL IOE about 4 years ago now. Time does fly. and just having time to actually write books, which you never had time to do before. What I see happening within the initial teacher education, the policy just is shocking, and it's talking about taking away academic freedom, academic the freedom to, as an academic, the choices to make, the freedom to make your own choices in terms of the curriculum that you teach, is really quite shocking.
I think you've done your PhD just in time, because they haven't really changed in the ways that the government wants them yet, but we're being pushed into much more knowledge rich, cognitive stuff.
So I think sleeves rolled up, really, all of this over the next year, and we've got to really push back.
Some of you will have seen Mary Bassett here, who was
Joint General Secretary of the NEU.
Yeah, and she's doing a talk on Monday for the
It's sold out.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is that
for the Socialist Educational Association,
so that sort of stuff is going on and will go on, and will probably gather impetus as we get towards the election. Sorry, shut up.
Vicky, and then I think Marion. Oh no, sorry, Vicky, and then I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Barbara, sorry, Barbara, and then Marion, and then Jess, and then I think that's us, because we've got 11 more minutes.
I'll be very quick. Just to say, my daughter did drama and English A-level and is going to English University, so there is still some pockets of amazing teaching, but it really is a lottery. So I'm my background in teaching is early years and primary, and actually much of what you were saying in some ways we use a lot in early years and primary, and I wondered if you'd worked at all with primary colleagues as part of your research. And I feel that my own children, had this wonderful richness in their primary schools and using drama and looking at why Bigu's planet crashed, when they were 6, and then they go to secondary school, and it does get lost in these pair paragraphs, whatever they've got to write. I don't know, these horrendous things, and they do lose that love and passion. And I just wonder if you'd had any connections with your primary colleagues at all as part of the book.
I'm not as part of this book, but I'm very interested in Mantle of the Expert, which is a Heathcote thing.
Yeah.
Well, actually, our primary colleagues don't. I used to do a bit of drama on their PGC, but it depends. It all seems to be a bit variable, depending on whether or not there's a drama specialist, which is also the case in a lot of schools. That when really good drama teachers leave secondary schools, they're not being replaced.
That there's no you will never find a drama teacher on a PGCE course or in a primary school. So they So it has to be very much the examples you gave of the classroom teacher in the middle, just suddenly saying, drop everything and stand up and do Punch and Sally for 2 minutes, because
But also, I think that the thing, what I've always enjoyed about primary drama is that the focus is really on learning and cross-curricular drama, and I think that that's very much in the spirit of what we're writing about, and that's why the drama Heathcote role conventions are more appropriate for that kind of approach, because they are about learning and making meaning and developing understanding and doing the kind of thing that Maggie calls reading through drama. And there are more possibilities for that in primary. I used to do that kind of thing, but we didn't. So it's kind of in there, but not explicitly.
Quite a bit of the research that we use in the book is from Myra Barr's, obviously, but also other writings around that kind of embedded drama within English or literacy, whatever you might call it, is from often conducted in primary age with primary age children, and I suppose so. In that sense, we're indebted to primary colleagues' research. Internationally, here and internationally, one of our, what is absolutely apparent is so much less has ever been done around secondary English And what we were trying to do is, I think, sort of redress that balance and say, this isn't just about that idea of play, oh, that's for little children,
Yeah.
you know, this is the messing about stuff, this is let them play a bit. When they get, you know, as they get older, then you're into, you know, rigor means not playing, not enjoyment, not being imaginative, creative. And what we were trying to do is to say, no, this is actually absolutely fitting for secondary age as well. And what we've done is use some of that research that's been done in primary years and apply it to secondary.
But to be absolutely honest, we're secondary specialists, and there's a hell of a lot of work that needs to be done in secondary.
Yeah.
You
And I
know,
think we need a book like this in primary as well, actually.
Well, didn't you co-write one on creativity?
Here's Barbara now. Would you like to ask a question?
Sure. I just wondered whether you felt as though, whether you feel as though cultivating high expectations in teachers is crucial to enabling this.
well, I think one thing I would say is that what doesn't create high expectations is if you infantilize teachers by telling them that they haven't got any judgment or skill or expertise and they have to teach. Here's a ready-made package for you. If you do that, you take away their agency and their expertise. So that's policy that's doing that. That's not that English teachers have low expectations. It's that they are not trusted professionally. And you know, if you don't trust them professionally, then what are they? They're deliverers. And that to me is not what teaching is about.
And that's giving you permission as a teacher to make mistakes.
Yes.
To experiment, some things will work, some things won't. But you're learning from that all the time, and you try things out, and rather than that expectation that every lesson is some flaw, you know, ultra controlled, and therefore absolutely no risks are taken, and you know, no room for mistakes kind of brand of pedagogy, which just must be deathly for I think for teachers as well as the poor kids in the classroom.
Marion?
Thank you very much for being here. It was, I kind of totally agree with you that it's important that we are active in our subject associations, because even, you know, these governments that we've had have to listen a bit to subject associations. Of course, the role of the unions. I mean, when I was a school teacher, the NUT had a big role in developing the curriculum generally. And that's been taken away from us. So it has happened, so it is a positive again. And I think the Social Education Association, which is linked to the Labour Party, but you don't have to be in the Labour Party to be in, I've just been suspended. But,
you can still be a member of the Socialist Education.
I'm still part of that. But the other thing is, in languages, I think drama should be at the heart of a lot of things. I think, and in languages, we even have part of the oral exam is role play. But it's role play without any drama. So it's about trying to persuade teachers that if you really do this, if you get kids engaged in using language sort of emotively, you know, to show their happiness, to show their sadness, to show their concern, they actually are more likely to learn this language. But I think it's great. And I'm now, along with Julia's daughter, we're engaged in peace education. So I'm hoping that I might get some ideas out of your book to promote that. So
Yes, I was going to say drama in history.
So
So
I love that. Was one of my favourite things to teach, history through drama. Back in the day.
There was a period, wasn't there? And there have been different ways when, you know, it's been about teaching humanities.
when the subject disciplines were, you know, there were experimentation around merging different stuff and thinking more thematically and thinking, and of course drama really lends itself to that. So I mean, we are talking about drama as learning, drama as a pedagogy, drama as an approach to thinking and understanding and developing a broader connection between areas of knowledge and
But not what we're not saying is just do a bit of drama in English. What we're saying is, hopefully, it's supported by, it's underpinned by theory and research. What we're saying is, it's like printed through like a stick of rock. That's the difference.
There is a particular affinity between English and drama.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not really quite, it was going to be similar to your question about activism and what we can do really, but I think just, I mean, I'm in the middle of school visits as well at the moment. I was in a school last week where what you were saying is interesting about English teachers being able to experiment and try stuff, and there was no talking at all in the lesson, and I talked to the teacher after and said, you know, maybe some talking group, and she said that she tried, I think, a pair share, not particularly extravagant, and a member of the SLT had done a drop-in that the school within the classrooms of glass walls, and the member of the SLT had come in and said it was too noisy, can you not do any pair work? So I think it's quite explicit now, and I think the idea about interesting to experiment in some schools, absolutely. Increasingly over the last few years, the one thing I've really seen is students who want to do that, quite tricky. And I think it's pedagogy tied to zero tolerance discipline.
Yes.
It's not how can we learn best, it's how can we keep students quiet.
And particularly multi-academy trusts are part of that push for that kind of controlled authoritarian sort of clamp down in terms of what's happening, control over what's happening in classrooms, and this idea of you know, silent classroom means learning is taking place.
You'll find that
leading on to the increase in exclusions that you mentioned.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Nuts being
Yes, mental absence.
Yeah, why would you want to be in a school when they're like that?
Amanda and I saw a play this morning at Haggerston. It was amazing about mental health. I mean, very done with kind of good, lots of different ages, weren't they? Really very impressive production. And I was so impressed by all their performance and their commitment and all that the young people were able to do and all that the teachers had done with them. But it left me feeling a bit hollow and depressed. But you know, what was inspiring them to make this work was something, it was really very about mental health, and that is a big focus at the moment, because that is the experience of a lot of young people in schools at the moment. In schools where they're not allowed to speak and they're not even allowed to socialise in corridors. I mean, what is the point of going to school if you can't talk to your friend in the corridor? And of course, it's some constituents, some schools more than others. Some children are thought that they shouldn't speak more than others. Obviously, you won't in grammar schools, they will be allowed to speak. So this is very unfair.
That's quite a strong point to end on there. And, I visited Haggerston as well, and saw the wonderful performing arts department. Yeah, taking my son around schools recently.
Yeah,
designed by a gold figure. Wonderful. So they're working in very different times, aren't they? The students there are expressing how they experience learning. So, yeah. Well, that was so fantastic as a presentation. We're really honoured to have had all three of you here in person. Absolutely fantastic. And please do come and get a copy of this wonderful book. I'm going to stop recording now, so anything you say is off the record.
No, say what you really think.